there any responses or kind of thoughts to that before we move on to Sid's? Hand it to Sid.
Maybe just curious to know, also knowing you guys are also in the Uniswap working group now, which is obviously an approach of researching, or really taking it from scratch, researching best practice in treasury management, and then really going into the depth of putting it into the context of Uniswap in that sense. What's your view on, starting with the working group like that versus, an individual party starting with it, or, just your learnings on how to approach it at best would be curious to hear.
Hey Bernard, this is Coltron. Yeah, so we are serving on the working group in Uniswap. Work there will start on the 20th of May, if everything goes smoothly. That's a unique situation because that was started by the DAO, and then driven by a few contributors. So I don't know if it's like an apples to oranges comparison. I think it works in some cases, but it just kind of depends.
Perfect. Yeah. If sorry, unless there's anything else, just had a few thoughts on how we could work in concert with treasury managers like Karpak. You've got so much experience in actually managing the treasuries of several different types of DAOs, each with their own objectives and each with their own longer term visions. I'd say one of the first things that we would want to define is how do we want to think of the treasury. So referring to the Uniswap example, they can treat it like an endowment. So how exactly do we want to treat the treasury? What exactly are we optimizing for, right? So what is the long term vision, and how much runway do we need over how many years? I think that those are the kinds of higher level objectives then would drive quite a lot of the decision making in terms of the types of assets that you deploy into. How do you utilize the treasury productively? How much risk and return do we need to balance on a yearly basis, and then also in terms of the assets that the treasury is diversified and invested into. um, Also considerations around how do you deal with the native tokens, that the native token makes up a huge portion of the treasury, and how do you most effectively mitigate against that, and also potentially use that to your advantage. And then potentially optimizing the treasury to be as productive as possible while balancing the risk and return. So yeah, would be good to get an idea on those kinds of things, and develop that. I think, yeah, personally speaking, some of I find it interesting how Uniswap is tackling the problem as well in terms of conducting the research into the types of treasury management initiatives that are currently out there, what best practices are in other DAOs, etc., and analyzing it in terms of in the context of legal considerations as well, um, and also coming up with an opinion on how best to procure treasury managers, and set them up for success and set the DAO up for success as well. I think those are pretty interesting considerations for how this could potentially be managed, but also there are other ways as well to set up requirements for how treasury managers for what treasury managers would do for the DAO, allowing them to pitch their experience and the types of things that they could do, and then selecting them based on the quality of the responses, and also just based on what exactly the aim is for the DAO. So yeah, quite a few different objectives in terms of what the treasury needs to be utilized for, and how to actually get the best parties in to actually manage that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, Sid, I can reply some of your questions. You mentioned the endowment, how to, you mentioned an endowment, how to create. I think an endowment makes sense for a DAO that is a little bit more developed, at least with its treasury, with large cash flows, a little bit more mature. I don't think this is the case for SAFE today, just because this treasury is 100% in native tokens. So it wouldn't really make much sense to have a separate endowment. That's usually a sort of war chest for rich DAOs. Let's put it that way. So that's the case of ENS. Also, you mentioned about the strategy. What's the best way to tackle the strategy of the treasury regarding the DAO? Of course, every DAO is different. And at least we are firmly believers that the treasury managers should be followers, and there needs to be a very strong overall strategy for the DAO with its leaders. That these are usually the founders who set the technical roadmap and what are the actions they're trying to stimulate or to achieve. And then the treasury should just follow, deploy capital to make sure those KPIs based on these high level strategies are achieved. So of course there are DAOs where these are much more chaotic than SAFE, and this doesn't exist. In these cases, well, we step up and we try to set a strategy, but I don't think it's the case for SAFE because it's a very, very organized DAO with a strong leadership. So yeah, the risk is completely, in my mind, treasury managers should follow the technical road of the founders. And the key thing here is that the leadership needs to be always aligned, and the treasury should always be aligned with the leaders, with the leadership. In our case, it could be SAFE founders, it could be the largest token holders, it could be the specialist guardians. It really depends. You also mentioned about productivity and returns. And this is a point we have a very strong opinion. I think treasuries should never behave like a hedge fund or a prop fund. Treasuries are there, again, to fulfill the DAO's vision, which means that yield is nice if we have some idle assets, but of course we don't play with runway, we don't do anything like that. But if the treasury has some idle funds, okay, we could deploy some low risk strategies, very low risk. We don't want to damage the DAO's vision to get some yield, right? The DAO's vision is the largest, the important part here. Not yield is completely irrelevant. So that's regarding the strategies. Then you also mentioned legal considerations. So this is a tough one because we want to make sure the DAO holds custody at all times. We don't want to delegate the treasury, the funds to any other party because it would be dangerous. The DAO might not have the legal tools to enforce, so we want to keep everything on chain, everything non-custodial, everything, of course, smart contract based. So those are my thoughts on legal. And yes, so overall, I think the key thing for treasury managers is to be aligned with the leaderships. Also, I don't think it makes sense to have multiple treasury managers, just like it doesn't make sense to have two CEOs or two CFOs. I've seen this in the past and it was a failure. So I'll give you a few examples. For example, you have two treasury managers, you're just treating your treasury as several endowments. And then these treasury managers can have different strategies. One treasury manager can be long ETH, another one can be short ETH, and they're just wasting money for the DAO. Then also, if they differ in the strategy, basically you have paralysis by analysis and nothing happens. Again, we've seen this many times in other DAOs. We don't want this. Again, we need a strong leadership. We need a strong aligned community with a defined strategic vision, and we want to make sure every service provider and guardian becomes a follower of that vision. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Perfect. I think yeah, makes quite a lot of sense, and thanks so much for the input. Actually, it's really good to hear from your experience on that, especially around like the angles around productivity and how you treat the treasury and how that differs from DAO to DAO. So yeah, really helpful to hear that context for sure.
And Ainsley from Avantgarde here, some great thoughts, and yeah, maybe just responding to Sid as well, just because yeah, we're very happy to be part of the conversation and see how this evolves. I think maybe just sharing our perspectives in terms of treasury management. Very much agree with points made, which is quite early stages at the moment. A lot of it should really revolve around treasury management is obviously implementation of a clear goal of where you want to be, right? And having those goals and objectives. And Amy alluded to some of these when talking about runway, burn rate, and things like that. The maybe less sexy part of treasury management, that is very much a starting point, and that should define what sort of strategies you use and not the other way around. In terms of points about yield, etc. Yes, it's very much those things should be in line with what the financial objectives are, and every DAO is very different. As Sid's mentioned, looking at the DAO landscape based on on-chain data, yes, there's a lot of a lack of diversification, shall we say, across the treasury landscape. That will obviously evolve over time. But one issue maybe to think about over time, the effect of that of having very concentrated treasuries is naturally the price volatility. Which is just just a fact of life when it comes to crypto. However, there is this feedback mechanism where having a high volatility in your treasury obviously makes things a little bit more challenging in terms of longer term planning, and especially when you're talking about grants and the power of grants, given that in this day and age things are still there's the economic power with which you can buy things are measured in fiat. So that's the dollar volatility. It can be important to consider, and in terms of covering operating expenses, etc. A lot of the implementation should take those things into account, but also very much with one eye on managing market impact and some of the things that Marcel has mentioned being very important. And in terms of processes for service providers, etc. That's obviously a fuller conversation as things develop, because there's so many angles to this, so many ideas within the ecosystem that can be brought together. But yeah, we're very very happy to share our thoughts along the journey as well.
So I see you typing. I don't know if you are just wanting to speak as a response. Okay. Maybe, sorry, Naomi, I know you were been waiting. Did you want to speak?
Hi, everyone. Yes. Not to echo too much of what's already been said, because I know Sid and Clabberus already went back and forth a little bit, but I think I wanted to just share a few of my, I think, ideals for SafeDAO and its treasury, and what we can consider to be like a capital coordination cycle that the treasury manager will be supporting with. And under this, I like to think of 4 main things. So on one hand, strategic allocation. I think the DAO has already created a pretty good framework for strategic allocation of assets, but would be nice to see plans around market analysis and any risk assessments, and of course how these allocations align with the vision and the goals of the DAO and the safe ecosystem. And then the other point would probably be value extraction. Of course, we know that DAO treasury managers aren't meant to act like hedge funds, but it would be nice to just sort of like see how we plan to manage like assets and how we might in some cases want to maximize like returns, of course like in line with the risk tolerance of the DAO. And then of course like value coordination, I think like safe is highly composable, so it would be nice to see like how we plan to just compose with other protocols alongside us and like entering into strategic partnerships that might be able to amplify value, which is like another point that we've touched on. And then of course value distribution. I work in a few different DAOs where like this is a big point of like contention when it gets into like distributing value from the DAO. And I think this is something that a few people have like rushed into in terms of like revenue sharing or like token buybacks and so on. We've seen a lot of like blunders committed on those fronts. So I know that this is probably like much further out, but it would be nice to just like keep the community aligned on what plans for value distribution might look like. And then another thing that is really just like important to me would be just like how we can establish protocols in line with the governance framework. So just like making sure that there's space for regular updates, reporting, and just involving the community itself in treasury related decisions. So I know that since the SAFE token has become transferable, we will be opening up the floor to a lot more contributors, people with diverse perspectives, and it would just be nice to have a structured way of incorporating all these perspectives and their feedback into some of these decisions. So yeah, that's just my take from a non-treasury manager, just things I would like to see us cover, achieve, and think about as we do this.
Thanks for sharing. I did notice, Spike Watanabe, that you had put up a proposal, which a discussion post, and wondering if there was any topics you wanted to cover. If not, if you felt everything was covered, or if it's a specific topic you want to put off for the different call with Kapaki, we can do.
Yeah, hi. Well, basically, the idea behind my post, and I think that that is very general thought, really, is that when we are touching such matters as SAFE, because SAFE is one of the, well, foundational milestones of the ecosystem, right? I think it's very important to take things very slowly, so that we can consider all of the angles and all of the participants and have their say, and there is a competitive angle to that as well, but it's not necessarily maybe even about competition per se, but it's about the right fit, because there could be several people who have different things to say, and it just might so happen that given enough time, the right service provider will have the right thing to say, which fits the DAO in the right way, So I was active member of ENS process, for example, where we were choosing the service provider for the where the Karpaki was chosen, and the whole process took approximately 11 months, and that was a very, very long discussion, and it was a very detailed RFP, and it was a very detailed discussion around service providers, how they were marketing themselves, and so on. So, and we are doing here with the whole decentralization narrative, right? Ethereum, ENS, SAFE, all those things are the milestones, and they need to be solid for the whole thing to work. And obviously endowments, they're very important parts of this, because we need to finance properly those milestones. If the funding is off, then the whole thing crumbles, right? So I have a background as a professional financier, and the way I see it is always in terms of cash flows. So there has to be cash flows supporting the ecosystem in the right way. So yeah, these are my thoughts in essence, to take things slow, and to approach it carefully in a very holistic manner, should I say.
Yeah, maybe I can explain a little bit how things developed with a safe treasury. Being a sister project, we've been discussing with the Safe Foundation for a long time, offering our services for years. I really think it's been years since we've been trying to work with them. But at the end, all of the treasury management efforts were blocked by legal requirements from the Safe Foundation, and I think that's the main reason the Safe Foundation eventually didn't try to look for help in treasury. Very recently, we were approached by them because of the transferability event, which I agree with you, it was rushed. It's no secret that I didn't really support the token generation event at this time, because I'm also a finance person like you, and you would never see in the public market a project without cash flows doing an IPO, right? And it makes sense because it's very difficult to evaluate a project without cash flows. It's just speculation. But there you are, we're in crypto, and people just wanted to have the token transferable, and it's up to the token holders, and they decided, But if it was, if I was the largest token holder, I would have voted against that. So having said that, we were asked to help them in the token launch, and I'm glad that we did. So because most of the traded volume across all exchanges, including centralized and decentralized, were traded with our very small liquidity we were able to get. So at least we help a little bit there, and I'm glad we did.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate it. That's actually a fair point. May I ask? There's one point I just keep confused about, because there is 40% of treasury, and there's the 5% of the joint treasury. So the mandate is it for the 40%, or is it for the 5% joint treasury? Because I understand that the 15% has been already allocated to the Gnosis treasury as it is. So what's the construction here? Because from the text of the mandate, it's not. Maybe I'm just not reading it right.
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. So from the Gnosis DAO, that 20%, maybe Julian can help me here, but I understand the Gnosis DAO locked most of their holdings, I think 80%, something like this.
Yeah, that's correct. So a huge amount of the funds of Gnosis DAO, around half, are still vesting. So of the liquid holdings of Gnosis DAO, 80% were locked yesterday for the activity program. And I think it's important to remark here that the objective of this is signaling to the market the long-term alliance that will remain between Gnosis DAO and SafeDAO. The second point that is important about the current status of Gnosis DAO treasury for the funds is that tomorrow a distribution of 9 million SAFE is going to happen to GNO stakers and lockers. And this was voted more than 2 years ago by GNO holders. So far, these are the two big things that we have been doing and supporting with the Gnosis DAO. And I think your question was about the mandate. So on the one side, Karpathy is managing Gnosis DAO funds. With the treasury, I mean. On another side, our mandate within SafeDAO is specifically allocated for the joint treasury between SafeDAO and Gnosis DAO, which has about 50 million SAFE.
Yes, and so we will also use the resources from the joint treasury to build a team for the overall safe, the 40%, the overall safe DAO treasury. And the main goal for that will be research, getting parties aligned, because it's going to be a huge effort that will require many service providers. So even though we don't have active execution on that part, we're working to make a plan, to do research, to hire the right people, and get the right partners on board to hopefully deliver for a safe DAO.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for your comments.
Hey, Spike, I do just want to make one clarification since this call is recorded. I think you had mentioned the ENS process took around 11 months. I believe the RFP for that was posted in August. And then the snapshot to select providers was executed or was passed in November. So it's roughly was a 4-month process to select a provider, not 11.
Yeah, well, I mean, technically maybe you're correct, but there were discussions like before that, so I'm kind of taking it like all in all. But technically, you may be correct that this is the case. I don't mind. I'm just saying that these things. The point is not to argue about how many months took what. The point is that it's important to take things slowly and consider, be very considerate of what's really important. That's what I wanted to say.
Gotcha. Thanks, Spike.
Just with a few minutes left, I'm curious if anyone else who hasn't spoken wants to say something or ask questions, or feel free to unmute. So in terms of just next steps, we are going to create a forum post for those who weren't able to make this call. So we're going to share the recording, hopefully it did record, and the notes from it. And so we wanted to gather this discussion based on the kind of like input we got around wanting to have more of a process around treasury management, but from what I hear, I guess I don't hear like a strong call for I guess like more process around the selection or around the main treasury, but I could be wrong. We're going to put a call out on the forum, and then the discussion, it's going to be on a new separate thread. And then just following up, we will have a separate call with Karpathy on their proposal and what their plans are for the joint treasury. And then we will organize any other calls that we feel are appropriate based on just sort of the feedback we've gotten from everybody. any last thoughts we want to open it up for before we call it?
Yes, I have a thought. 25 people are here and no one was shouting at each other. That's amazing. I love it. Keep going like this.
Okay, so if there's no other comments, we really appreciate to everybody, also to the Karpaki team that answered a lot of questions and kind of shared evidences. So appreciate it. We will, for the Guardians and the sorry, just seeing all the emojis for all the Guardians and delegates who are on this call. Please make sure you check out the proposals on the forum, so that you just see if they are appropriate to move into the next phase. For that, we're going to wrap it up, and thanks to everyone who came.